Assalamu alaikum everyone, my name is Vaisam and you're watching Hashtags. In the previous video we learned about the states, but in this video we're going to talk about the props. What are props and how we utilize the props in our React app. Prop stands for properties. In React, we use the props to send the data from one component to another component. For example, from the parent component to the child component. And it's not only the data that we can pass between the components, but also the event handlers. We can pass the event handlers from the parent component to the child component. Props are immutable. Once set, they can't be changed. We can set the props for both class components and the functional components. Before we get started with the code, uh, let me tell you how we pass the data uh, in the child component. Let's suppose we have a tool component and inside we want to pass the name and the tool. We'll just write tool, name is equal to name, and the tool is equal to tool. And that is how we pass the data to the child components. Let's suppose you want to pass an event to that component as well. You can define the handler or the function that you want to pass, and then you can write handler is equal to event name. But remember, it's up to you how many parameters you want to pass to that component and how you want to name them. We will start with our class components first. I will jump into my code editor and create a component called tools. And I'll add the constructor for that. Inside the constructor, we'll pass the props parameter. I'll call the super method and pass the props. And inside the render, as we're passing two values, the name and the tool, so we will write h1 tag, my name is, and in order to access the props, we can use this keyword and dot props. So inside the curly braces, we will add this dot props dot, we want to access the name, so we can write dot name. My name is, and it will be dynamic, and then we're going to print the tool. And we can write my favorite tool is, we'll write curly braces, this dot props dot tool. Let's import that component into our app.js file. And open the terminal and start the project by typing npm start command. Let's go to our web browser and we can see that is working fine. That's how the props work inside the class components. There might be a situation where you want to set the default values for the props. You can simply write tool.default props and then assign the props object. And inside the object, you can set the values for the props. For example, if I want to set the values for the name and the tool, I can just write name and give it a value, and then tool and give it a value. Now let's learn about the functional component, how to use the props with a functional component. I'll go to the tool.js file and comment all the code. I'll type RCF and select the first one to create the tool component. Now let's see how to use the props with the functional component. But before that, let me tell you that there are two ways to use the props: without destructuring and with destructuring. Inside the tool, I'll pass the parameter props. Now I'll just add the same HTML. In the return, I'll write my name is curly braces, and in order to access the props value, I can type props.name, and then I'll write my favorite design tool is, and same, in order to access the props value, I'll type curly braces props.tool. And now let's go to the app.js file and import that component and pass the values. Now if we go to our web browser, we can see that it's working fine. Now let's start with the destructuring one. With destructuring, we can eliminate the props word and directly access the values. We'll just remove the props from here and type curly braces, and we want to access two values, name and tool. So we'll write name and tool. And now in the return statement, we can just remove the props dot name and write the name instead. And similarly, in the tool, we can remove the props dot tool and write the tool instead. And now let's go back to our web browser and we can see that it's working fine. There might be a situation where you want to set the default values for the props. So after the return statement, you can write the component name, that is tool dot default props, and we can assign it an object of values that we want to set by default. On the left side, we will type the key, that is name, and on the right side, we'll write the value, comma, and then we'll write tool and then its value. As I mentioned, it's not only the data that we can pass between the components. It can also be the event handlers. So let's try an example with the event handler. I will open my code editor and open the app.js file. Inside the app.js file, I'm gonna create a state variable called count. I will type count and set its default value to 0. I'll create a handler called increment by 1 is equal to arrow function, and inside the arrow function will be incrementing the state value by 1. I will type set count and pass count plus 1. This should update the count value by 1. Now let me create another component called button. It should accept the handler parameter, and I'll pass props to that component. I'll write props, and uh, in the return we're gonna create a button. So I'll type button and type the button text increment value by 1, and we will add the event handler. On click is equal to curly braces props dot handler, and whenever we click that button, we're gonna call the handler method. We'll go back to our app.js file and we'll import that button component and pass the handler. We'll type button handler is equal to increment by 1, and we're also going to show the count value. So I will add an h1. Count value is curly braces count. And now let's go to our web browser and see if it is working fine or not. And you can see that the count value is set to 0 by default, but when I click the button, it updates it by 1. I hope now you guys have an idea of the props and how to use the props in your React app. But still, if you have any question, you can join my Discord community for the discussion, or also you can put the question in the comment section. I'll try my best to answer you as soon as possible. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Till that, take care. Allah Hafiz.